Listeners everywhere, welcome to the Movie Show with Joel and Ryan, the weekly fix for your screen addiction and a trusted source for discussion of all things film and television. Please keep in mind that for the purposes of this podcast, Joel and Ryan are not acting as journalists, but rather fellow moving picture enthusiasts. All of their opinions should be taken as such. Also, please be warned that while Joel and Ryan may seem like petulant children, they are, in fact, adults who may occasionally use adult language. While they promise to bleep out all the worst words, it's a good bet you will still understand what they were saying. And now, with no further ado, here's Joel and Ryan.
Gobble, gobble, everyone. And gobble, gobble. We are entering into the gobble, gobble season. And welcome to the Movie Show with Joel and Ryan. The Gobble Gobble Show with Joel and Ryan. I'm Joel.
I'm Ryan.
And it's just the two of us. It is old school Movie Show with Joel and Ryan. We're going kind of really old school. We're kind of going back to original formula. Movie Show with Joel and Ryan classic. With how we're doing the show today. Because we're entering the holiday season and we got a bunch of fun stuff lined up. A lot of fun guests that we're gonna have. We're gonna holiday movies, and then obviously after the year, the turn of the new year, we're gonna get into all of the year in review stuff. It's gonna be, we got a lot of fun stuff coming up at the end of the 5th season and the beginning of the 6th.
Wow.
So yeah,
we're gonna do a whole show on the Oscar slap a year later.
Yep. The Oscar slap.
We're not going to do that, actually. But we're going to do an alt Oscars like all that didn't even happen. That'll be fun.
Yep. And So today we got some fun stuff. We're going to talk about a great sort of not as talked about. That's not a thing.
I think that is a thing. I think that works.
He's not
as talked about, really.
Not as talked about. Yeah, not as he's not talked about as much as other directors. But
we're not even going to really talk about him very much. We're just going to talk about his movies. But there's not a real cult of personality there. Even though I think when he's only got a few films that he ever did, and I think if you string them together, there's definitely a lot of There's a signature style there, somewhat, which is kind of fun.
Yeah, and then we're gonna have classic. We're gonna get into the holiday season and in a fun way. And Ryan has no idea what I've cooked up.
Yeah, so if you're listening to this in March, whoops, sorry.
Yeah, but
it's Thanksgiving to us, so suck it, people who are 10 episodes behind. Sorry about that.
And that's fine. If you're 10 episodes behind, then you can just kind of live in the recent nostalgia.
No, Joel might forgive you, but I find that totally unacceptable, actually. So, sorry.
Well, okay. Well, you know
my
what?
New Year's resolution is to to hold a grudge against you. Is that kind of thing? Does that work?
Yeah,
I don't know.
I think. Well, yeah. I mean, it's we are tough but fair here.
I hereby resolve. No.
Okay,
Thanks for joining us whenever you're listening to this episode. There's some gobbles coming up, and
yep, I'm terribly sorry. I did not. This is for the video feed. I apologize. I just got to quick clean my camera here. There was a smudge right on it. That was just my eye just could not. Just keep going to the smudge. Anyway, so let's get but we're gonna start. Like I said, we're going old school. So hey, what you been watching lately, Ryan? What do we watch at this time of season?
This is how we used to start the show. All this nonsense and BS. Now we're like, Jesus, we got 14 movies we gotta start right now.
Oh my God, get it! Oh boy, we know. Michael's
all the urgency has left the show.
Like, hey, what you been watching?
What have I been watching lately? Well, I feel like I brought this stuff up before, so so I don't want to get too into it, but I don't really know even. I saw a thing called these are old now. I guess they're from the aughts, but I saw a movie called Creation. Have you ever seen that? With
No.
Paul Bettany and who's the lady in that? She's really awesome. It's a movie about Darwin and right on the sort
Oh,
of
yeah,
eve
yeah,
of
yeah.
his publishing on the origin of species, and thus mostly personal, but also somewhat geopolitical forces that are sort of tugging him one way or another. And him dealing with the loss of his daughter, which is sort of a spoiler for the movie, the way they reveal it. Is it Rachel Weisz that's the woman in Creation? I feel like Jennifer Connelly, somebody like that.
It is a who's
somebody
Jennifer Connelly
awesome
type?
who
It
has
is
dark hair of some kind.
Well, it actually is Jennifer Connelly, Mrs. Paul Bettany, of course.
Oh, well, that makes sense. So they made the movie together. Yeah. It's a good movie. It's interesting. It's like a period drama, but there's a lot of grief involved, in that they're trying to hold their family together. And it's an intimate story that gives you this sense of what it was for him to be saying the things he was saying. And it wasn't during the Spanish Inquisition or anything. I mean, he wasn't going to be drawn and quartered over these sentiments, but it really was going to shake things up because his ideas and his observations in nature were very scientifically sound, and there were people who wanted to. Toby Jones is great in it. My dear Darwin, you have done it. You have killed God, he says to him. And the look on Darwin's face when he hears that is like, Jesus, that's not what I was trying to do here.
That was not the goal.
But it's inflammatory. That's a little undersung movie that didn't get much of a release, and it didn't win a bunch of Oscars. So what is it then? If you're sort of a prestige film that doesn't get a lot of attention in the prestige circles, what are you? Usually you can still be pretty good. That one's really good. That's really good folks that show up in that. I can't remember the cat's name, so I won't say it, but a really, really good cast, really, really great child performance at the center of it as well. So Creation's really, really good. I talked about but I just want to say it again because I think you're missing out on this. If you really like adventure movies, and if you really like sort of down and dirty, like grungy ones that are slightly low budget, I highly recommend you watch in this order. These are from years ago, but Neil Marshall's Centurion with Michael Fassbender and Kevin McDonald's The Eagle with Channing Tatum. They tell the story of the lost Ninth Legion of the Roman army in England, which is a legend, and they're by English people, full of English people. English people play the Romans, and the English people, But it's funny that when you tell an old story of the Roman Empire that takes place in Britain, it's always the Romans that are the good guys, even though it's all made by British people. The Picts and the tribes and stuff that are fighting back against them are always horrifying and evil boogeyman, which is really, I think, they enjoy looking at it that way. And I think the story of them getting lost in Centurion, which is actually pretty silly, is fun. Actually, it's really fun, like survival tale, and there's tons of combat and action, and not an overly amount, but a decent amount of blood and guts to make that sort of sword and shield fighting believable. And then the Eagle is about a guy about a Roman centurion who's stationed in England and is just arriving there. And his father was part of the Ninth Legion that disappeared, and his whole drive is to live a life of honor and to move up through the ranks and to restore his family name. It's good enough. to be assigned and to become an officer, but there's always that, oh, your grandfather did this, was very much of those times, or your father did that. That's better. It's much better. It's less fun. Okay.
Yeah.
It is less fun. Centurion is just this fun, grisly chase movie. It's really, really fun. It's tons of combat, and Fassbender obviously looks great with his shirt off, and the women are completely badass in it. But Centurion's a fantasy, even though it's a decently put together one. It's a goofy fantasy. The Eagle is also a fantasy in that this mission that they achieve is completely false. But Channing brings a lot of weight to it. Actually, obviously, physically, a lot like Michael, he fits right in. He's a total action hero. But this is a thoughtful, high-minded thing. The Robins sit around and they talk about important stuff. And it features Donald Sutherland in a great role. Later period, it's who's the cat in it?
Jamie Bell.
Yeah, Jamie Bell. It's basically a team of and a Roman who go Hadrian's Wall, which Hadrian is being built for the first time. That's become the solution to their problem. And then by the time we get to the Eagle, it's fully built. And to go north of it for any reason is just considered total suicide. But they go up there through a convoluted bunch of events. They become connected to one another. He becomes free to basically follow his bliss, and his bliss is to go up to where all the savages live and find the fallen eagle of the night. The eagle, if you've ever watched any Roman movies, that golden eagle on a stick that each, it's called their standard, that each legion carries before them. It represents Rome and everything, and it's everything to them. And so he wants to go capture the fallen eagle of the Ninth Legion, and it's fun. I mean, it's a lot of sneaking around and pretending you're somebody else, and there's a pretty decent battle at the beginning. It's a gorgeously shot film, shot in England. It really shows the backwoods of Scotland and stuff in ways that, that are still there, that are really magical and stuff. So I dig those movies. I think they make a swell double feature. I think maybe watching them in the same sitting maybe is not such a great idea, but watching them in order, spread out a little bit. I've said that before on the show, but here I believe I've really articulated it. And I think if you don't want to watch it now, then
you're lost. You're lost.
Yeah,
forever.
Then you're just never going to want to watch my Centurion double feature. It's not great. They're B movies. They're basically straight to video movies. They both had theatrical runs or whatever, but they just, in their day, that was in the times now when we get like one movie comes out every other week. Back in those days, it was 7, 8 films every weekend. And so the fact that the Eagle came in third on its weekend, or Centurion came in fourth, that was something. It made you a little money and got you on the record, but the way we watch stuff now is so changed. But I didn't look this up for you, but I can't imagine those films are hard to track down or to stream for free. And
just closed my tab, and I can tell you where. And
I think they're very entertaining and fun, and I think they are made in kind of just the right order. Actually,
Centurion is available. Let's see, you can. It's available on Hulu, on Prime Video. You can rent it from Prime.
That was
Video,
Magnet Pictures, which was HD Net associated, which is what's his face, the big millionaire who owns the Dallas Mavericks. I can't remember that guy's name.
Mark Cuban.
Yeah, that was basically his just using some of his unused trillions to make these little movies and to provide his own little content machines with content. I remember it was a big deal at the time. It was see Centurion at home on HD Net as it's opening in theaters. That was a radical idea when Centurion came out, which is now it's like theaters. Why bother with that?
Yeah. Why is it to the theater? So Centurion is available on Hulu, and you can rent it from plenty of plenty of places. The Eagle is available if you are a subscriber to Stars. But you can also rent it, on Prime Video or there's several streaming sites here.
The Eagle's is Universal Pictures. I'm surprised it's not on Peacock, but maybe it's just not good enough for them. That was actually put out by Focus Features. So,
well, even on Peacock and stuff like that, they'll sometimes pull stuff, so then they can say, "Hey, look what's back this month." Hey,
there was an idea that is now dead. We've talked about it before, where these streaming services had all this content, and that was going to be HBO was going to be the place where old MGM movies and old Warner Brothers movies and stuff just lived, and you would just have it there at your fingertips at all times whenever you wanted to watch it. And the financial viability of that was always suspect, and that's changed quite a bit of late. So now if you want to watch stuff, just go F yourself. It's good luck. Hey, we tried to put a double feature episode together that was supposed to air around this time. Yeah, last week it would have been.
Last week,
and we couldn't do it because we couldn't find a way to watch stuff. Literally, stuff that's not terribly obscure, actually. And a full quarter of the stuff that we wanted to talk about was just a big hassle to find and deal with, so we just didn't do the show. It's tragic.
Yeah.
And it's only going to happen more and more. So next time for my double feature, I'm just announcing it here. It'll be whatever the top 2 things on Hulu is at the time.
There you go. We'll talk about that.
Maybe it'll be Thor and the other Thor. I'm considering that as well.
I'll
the experiment will be to see which Thors people choose or think I'm talking about.
Yeah, I'll just pick like 2 episodes of Parks and Recreation because I know I can stream those.
Or The Office.
Or The Office.
Sure.
But we'll talk. We'll lament more about that on a future Ryan's Video Corner. But
that's a little glimpse into this. There's lots of other stuff I'm watching that I think is fun that I watch this time of year, some of which we talked about. Well, I'll say one other one. I don't know that this isn't a good movie either, but there's a movie with Aaron Eckhart, Bridget Moynihan and I can't remember her name. She's in Michelle Rodriguez. She's the one in all the Fast and Furious movies and stuff. And called Battle Los Angeles. And it's an alien invasion movie where aliens come and the military. But what's great about it isn't that it's the alien invasion, because that's whatever. It's that it's a military combat movie where you have to fight in Los Angeles, and the aliens just mean that Americans get to be super underdogs in it. But it's a military movie. I can't stress that enough. And the combat scenes in it are off the hook good. And it's always been true of it. I think it's just the silly premise that drags it down. And then there was very similar, like a couple years later, Battleship came out, which is much dumber, but a lot more fun. Although everyone hates that too. But that had a very, very similar premise. But Battle Los Angeles is great spectacle, and if you like those sort of military movies, it's really, really good. It's really got a lot. I like that something about that sort of storytelling, Joel, that appeals. That it's not people running around like crazy in the chaos like in a disaster movie. It's military guys who each thing getting from here to that bus is the mission, and the way they think and the way the story's told, because of the way that's communicated amongst the characters and stuff, it's just very, very pleasing. I like setting a goal, seeing whether you get it. If you don't, what do you do instead? Like, I dig that very much.
The director, Jonathan Liebesman, is that Liebesman?
Yeah,
Liebesman. He, I'm just reading some of the comments and the back, the trivia and stuff, the behind the scenes stuff. He, he didn't intentionally what he would watch for inspiration was the battle scenes from Black Hawk Down and Saving Private Ryan.
Right.
So it's an alien invasion film, but with trying to trying to capture that.
But there's no
like
scientist.
You said, it is a military battle film. Yeah.
Right. And it's not even just that. It's just this rescue unit. It's this small rescue unit sent behind enemy lines to do something specific. And so there's no scenes at command with any hand wringing. There's no scientist who's solving everything. It's just
we can give it a cold.
Yeah, it's just this combat unit behind enemy lines in like Venice, where shooting and shit shouldn't be happening, and they're in people's backyards, they're falling into their pools, they're getting tangled up in their laundry lines, and it's weird, but it's wonderful in that way. And there's a real sense of service and duty to the thing that I just really admire. So that's one that it's dumb. The premise is dumb, but I think if you're one of those people who are like, oh, that sounds fun, like, then this one was fun. You will, you certainly get into it. If you can get over the idea, you'll definitely get into it because it's well done. And it's too bad Jonathan Liebsman, we talked about him last week. We didn't really talk about him, but we talked about Wrath of the Titans, which was the next movie he did. That movie was pretty awful, but I think he was...
Yes.
And it didn't have any of the things that are great about Battle Los Angeles in it, like his sense of composition and his visual style and his sort of goal-oriented filmmaking. Like it was just awful. And it's a shame because I don't really think it's his fault. I think they just money grab. Nobody really came to the party quite to do that the way they should have. So.
Well, to no one's surprise, I've been watching documentaries. That's what I do. I like documentaries.
There's a lot of interesting ones coming out right now.
I watched one just last night called Stutz, which is Jonah Hill essentially making a documentary about his therapist, because his therapist, he was so enamored. He is so enamored by how his therapist helped him that he wanted to try to share these tools, and in doing so, he reveals a lot about him, his own anxieties it's if you've ever been in counseling, if you've ever thought about it, this is one type of mental health counseling and psychology that he has a lot of. This Dr. Stutz is his name. He has a lot of tools that he and visualization thing. Not all therapy is like that, but this is the therapy that worked for Jonah Hill, and it's really fascinating. And as a film, as a documentary, it ends up becoming a really interesting way of telling the story, because it's a story about mental health, and essentially Jonah Hill is filming his own therapy sessions, and then partway through the film reveals, like, he's like, I just sort of need to stop because I'm wearing a wig right now because we're trying to make this look like the stuff that we shot 4 months ago. And then he just takes off this wig and he's like, what am I doing? We're not even in your office. And then they turn off, they're in front of a green screen to make it look like his office. And they're like, what am I? I'm lying in a documentary that I'm trying to, the whole point of it was I wanted to show how, we can get to the truth of things. And here I am just lying. What am I doing? And it's really fascinating that from that point on, they never turned the green screen stuff back on. It's just little X's on the walls and stuff like that. And it becomes really, it just, gives a little bit more authenticity. This doctor is a fascinating cat. He's, he just has lots of great ideas. He's an incredibly caring and empathetic person, but also very human. He gets at, he in trying to help Jonah and talking about Jonah's therapy, he reveals some of, his own insecurities and some of the own stuff that the stuff that he still struggles with. And, that whole, what was I can't remember the exact quote, but it was like, it goes back to that whole, the people that you look up to don't have the same problems as you.
Right.
And it's that whole idea. And so this Jonah Hill clearly loves this man and is so grateful for this man. And then it's like, it's that idea of, okay, I need to remember, I need to remember that this is just a guy, and he has his own issues and insecurities too. And it's that whole, therapists get into therapy because most of them need therapy. So yeah, it was just really, it's great. It's only like an hour and a half. It's really, it's interestingly shot. It's got some nice little twists and turns on it. And it's lovely. It's a lovely documentary for people who are, especially if you've had depression and anxiety and have needed to seek therapy for that. You will understand a lot of the impulses and a lot of the things going on in there. And this is a guy who has developed some tools that he thinks, and he's a really engaging guy, and they're very funny together.
I've never liked Jonah Hill in a single thing I've seen him in my entire life. Is that important?
No, because he's not playing a character.
Cool.
He's a guy who is,
I'm sitting here trying to think of one, and I can't think of a single one. Like, I just think he's.
Did you like him in Moneyball?
Not really. Although a little Moneyball's not bad because who wrote that? Somebody good, right?
Yeah, I don't remember.
And you pretty much have to. Somebody wrote that who you pretty much have to stick to what they say. That helps.
Right.
They're not just winging it.
Let's see who wrote that film. Where is that? Oh, come on! I just want the ding dang IMDb thing.
But Moneyball's not bad. That's a good example.
Zalian and Sorkin wrote it.
There you go.
You gotta say the words.
He's pretty good in that. All right, thank you for thinking of one, because I'm like, there's got to be a couple. Otherwise, what is he doing here?
Yeah. I mean, obviously known for Superbad and Knocked Up, and
I don't like him in any of those. Like that. Nor did I like any of those films.
Yeah.
So
his voice acting is quite good in How to Train Your Dragon. I'll give him that.
Nice.
A movie that I adore. But yeah, anyway, he's just a guy in this one who happens to be a movie star.
Well, and he's been pretty public about what he's been going through for a while. Mm-hmm. And this is sort of the culmination of that, where you really get to live through a little bit of it with him, which that's hard not to feel for somebody when it's that case. So
right.
And
he's not putting on a character. In fact, it's the exact opposite. He's doing his darndest to strip away any affectations.
Even though the instinct is there to cover up, to do a performance. Like you say, you point out this moment where, although that's, I don't know how that happens naturally on a thing with the way
because he's also the director. And it is a setup in the sense, but he's like, that's what he came, they were,
but he's still making a point by doing that for a benefit.
He did all of this setup, all of these things. And as the director, he clearly made the choices like, okay, we got to make this look like it's one session and blah, blah, blah. And then he's realizing, what am I doing? I don't need to make it. Like, it's almost like he had them to give him a lot of credit, it's almost like on the day, in the moment, he realized, what am I doing? Let's just leave, let's tear away.
Since we have all this shit here, let's use it to show where that decision's being made. I get it. It's cool.
Yeah. So as a documentary feature, it was, interestingly shot, and it was, and it really keeps things really intimate, which is nice. And then, the subject matter is interesting. So that's what we're watching. You know what? Years ago, we said we should probably have some sort of jingle for when we, when we do this segment.
I never said that.
I thought we had we should how we have our weekly countdown and all these other things. We should. No,
you just need to do one of those. What are you watching tonight? Little Paul Schaefer jingles.
Well, there you go.
It doesn't need anything more than that.
Like the Rob and Michael and Joel double feature. Okay, well, I'll get on the what are you watching today? Blink. That's I'll get that going. All right, but let's get to our main topic, our A topic today.
I wanted to do a puppet show too, because I wrote a song, but only my sock puppet character could sing it, which I don't seem to have anymore. So let's see if maybe Nathan Christopher will make me some cool sock puppet so I can do a little. Joel and I can do a little, sing a little song for you about a movie that my sock puppet character watched.
There you go. That's
her,
not bad.
Her name is Hazel, by the way.
Okay. Extra good.
She's great. She's super into movies like us, but she doesn't really. She's sort of weird. She sort of watches them with her own agenda in mind, which does kind of get confused every once in a while.
Zoom, the Zoom broadcast and the YouTube channel. Excuse me, the YouTube channel. That it does lend itself well to puppet shows because it is like your own little puppet theater that you can.
You'll have to break out the keyboards and play a little for me.
Yeah,
for it to work. So be ready for that.
All right. Well, coming in season 6, folks. Buckle up. All right. So today we are going to talk about we're calling it the top 5 movies, even though the dudes.
Yeah, even though I'm having a hard time ranking them, we're just going to do them in chronological order. Maybe rankings will become apparent as we go. I ranked them earlier in the week, but that was a mistake because I ranked them before I watched them. And now I think we just should go in the order they came out, and then we'll just see what happens.
Then give me a moment here to reshuffle my tabs here so I can.
There's only 5, so it won't be too hard.
Yeah, so it's not too hard. Yeah. So,
and when I ranked them, I put the year they came out next to their name. So
Yep.
So,
yeah, it's all good. All right, we're gonna do the top 5 movies of Carroll Ballard.
10 seconds. 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
And just so you out the audience don't think I'm totally mean and just change things on Joel on the air like that, I believe I did send him a missive earlier in the week saying that we should change this to chronological order. But oh yeah.
Nope. I'm looking at it right now.
Maybe I sent that to somebody else.
Was that the one that was in the wrong thread? You put it in the Michael and Ryan thread. That with our chat with Michael Klug. So it's me, you, and Michael. You put it in that thread.
Oh.
So yes, you did send it, but I don't know that I knew what it was referring to and probably dismissed it. Doesn't matter. We're all good. Carroll Ballard, you say.
Oh, like, because Michael non-RSVP'd to something. You don't have to do that. Just RSVP.
Well, maybe he and his husband are dealing with flooding. So that's, I
know on the 10th floor, I couldn't get any details out of them about that.
Yeah, we got to find out.
Flooding is the worst. Our hearts are with them, whatever the issue is, because it's, when you hear flooding, there's nothing good that comes to mind. I'm
just saying season 6 we'll do top 5 flood films. Because Ryan has had flooding. Jennifer and I, literally the day before we were to leave to come back, we were living in New York to come back to Minnesota to get married. Our basement flooded and we were on the third floor. So it's like the bathroom from a floor above us decided to leak. And so the day before, so anyway, so we all have flooding stories. Maybe we'll do a flood show in season 6. I'm just
one flood movies. Hard Rain for the win. Spoiler alert for the flood episode.
There's great floods in other films.
Oh yeah, but they're not flood movies. I guess the river, you can kind of count that one.
The river, Noah.
That's got quite a flood in it. All right, I stand corrected.
Yeah, all right. So we have top 3.
top 5 flood sequences, we'll call it.
There we go. All right. So we have now you say flood sequences, and now four more films pop in my head.
Well, yeah, because it's just, no, there aren't movies about the flood. There's only one that I can think of. And
what's that Naomi Watts one where it's the flood in the...
That's a tidal wave movie. So.
Oh, that's right. That is a tidal wave movie. Well, tidal waves lead to floods.
Yeah, I know. I'm not saying that there's not a flood aspect to it, but it's a tidal wave movie, and you can't just have it any way you want, you know. You have to pick what it is, and that's a tidal wave movie.
All right.
And we talked about it already in our disaster episode.
That's true. We did talk about that disaster film. There's no segue to get from disaster films to the movies of Carroll Ballard.
Well, there's a natural aspect to kind of everything that he does, actually.
Well, okay. Yeah, that's a good point.
That the elements and nature and animals in particular are really, really well represented in Carroll Ballard's work. And maybe that's a segue for you. I don't know.
There you go. Well, no, that works. So Carroll Ballard, Carroll Ballard only made, as a director, 6 films.
Yeah, from 1979 to 2005-ish.
Yep, 2005.
Was a working filmmaker, but only 6 films over that time. So he wasn't some dude where you just came up to him and said, "Hey, we got this great idea, and Robin Williams is going to be in it, and blah blah blah," and then he would just show up and direct something. Joel read the quote later, but he discovered stories, is how he put it, and that was his directing style, which was kind of a weird way of working, and it required him coming to the table with something that he was inspired to do that with, even though he's not credited with writing any of his own scripts or anything. He started out as a USC film student. He was a student at USC at the same time as, he's a little bit younger, but at the same time as George Lucas and John Milius. And that group of people that all signed up initially in the late 60s with Francis Coppola, who was much older than them, with American Zoetrope, who produced at least 2 of these, maybe 3 of them. We'll have to look. And it's actually Coppola, you know, that's how Lucas got his start, was Coppola championing his filming technique. And it's definitely how, it's not so much how Carroll Ballard got, because his first film was adapting a novel that was already a big hit. But he made it like in 1976-ish, 76, 77. It sat around for a couple of years before anyone would release it. And it was Coppola, who at that time had just done Apocalypse Now and the Godfather films, and was a very, very powerful, although not considered a very reliable producer commercially up until that point. He was very powerful enough to say, "You put this out. What are you waiting for? It's done. It's great. Put it out."
Yeah.
And
I mean, about the title.
Before we name that movie, we should mention that he was in England. He was George Lucas's second unit director on Star Wars in 1977, right before he started work on this one, or during it, to to kind of keep busy. And Lucas shot most of what you see for Star Wars, but there's still insert shots. There's shots of people's hands, shots of a gun falling on the ground, shots of a bunch of extras running this way and then running that way. There's all that stuff that when your key actors aren't involved and stuff, then typically your key director isn't involved. It's very funny because on Return of the Jedi, the uncredited second unit director was actually George Lucas, who in particular shot most of that Battle of Endor stuff in the jungle and everything. Because the director they got for that movie wasn't, did a lot of action stuff, but wasn't as comfortable with that side of things, like especially the speeder bike chase.
Right.
That required a lot of imagining what was going to be here in a way that Lucas was very tied into as executive producer, but as a director on the ground who had never done an effects film, maybe wouldn't be.
Yeah.
So that's kind of interesting second unit story. So the second unit director on Star Wars was Carroll Ballard. That's one of his first credited jobs as a filmmaker. So it's not, that's not nothing. And it just shows you that all these guys from this generation, these boomers, as it were. They were all tied together, and they all were super supportive of each other, you know.
Right.
And they all, Carroll Ballard and Willard Hayek and Gloria Katz and John Milius all worked on the Star Wars script. They all helped him out with that. A lot of what we love about that first Star Wars script is Hayek and Katz, who are most famous for Howard the Duck, but all those quips and the princess barking at the pirate and stuff and all that humor and stuff, that's all them. Where there's no example in history of Lucas being able to pull that off on his own. When he tries, it's pretty hackneyed and stolid and stupid. They really brought that thing to life in that fun matinee adventure sort of way. And John Milius wrote the whole opening scroll for us, and he's the one who helped with the Empire and the formal way of speaking and stuff, and really helped with that. So they're, you know, and they didn't think of getting the credit. John Milius is credited with writing Apocalypse Now, but George Lucas broke the back of that story, basically figured out what the structure of it was, and came up with all these sort of horrific events that they go through in that film, and he didn't get credit for it. And it wasn't really they didn't go to arbitration. Like they were communal. And this is really admirable thing about them, because I'll rip on baby boomer filmmakers a lot, but they were sitting around talking, helping each other out with each other's projects out of the goodness of their heart, because they saw art in cinema as a collaborative thing. And those were magic days. And Carroll's, he continued that. He really didn't concede to commercial concerns the way the rest of these guys did ultimately. Milius is a pretty stubborn cat as well, actually, but he just, you know, he doesn't have there's not a sellout of a film on this list, like, at all. They're all difficult projects that have lots of logistic and filming concerns that are kind of amazing. And so he's worth celebrating for that reason, also because he came up with all these people who are famous for all these great entertainments that we've gotten through the years. So that's my little, for a dude I don't know much about as a person. I mean, that's about as much as I can give you biographically about him. But his personality comes through the work, and I think you'll see that as we work through these movies. So
yeah, Carroll Ballard is clearly a guy who is drawn to the stories where human and either animal or human and nature really interact, and really find that. Is it symbiotic? But find that relationship.
That's a good word, even if it's not the one you're looking for.
Yeah, I don't know if that's the right. I don't know if I'm using it right, but that, it's very much there's a balance there. There's a respect that he wants to make sure comes through in his films, and that in his first film, 1977's The Black Stallion.
Is it 77? It's 79, isn't it?
Sorry, did I say 77? Sorry.
Well, it was made, like I say, it was kind of made back then, but it wasn't really released properly until 79.
79, so, right, yeah. Apologies for that. Yeah, 1979.
The Black Stallion was a big Oscar movie of 1979. So it's kind of weird. I haven't seen that movie that many times, actually, throughout the years. Three times, I think. I rewatched all of these for this episode, and they're still a little hard to talk about. Well, Joel, I'll let you read the old IMDb premise for it, because that gets us off on the right foot.
After being shipwrecked, I'm not going to speak today. After being shipwrecked with a magnificent horse off the coast of Africa in the 1940s, a boy bonds with the stallion and trains him to race after their rescue.
Yeah, so spoiler alert for the Black Stallion, but you can't talk about the Black Stallion without talking about its duality. There's these two totally different, almost totally different styled stories that are happening here. One is this steamer passenger ship that they're on, traveling across the Atlantic Ocean. I believe it's the Atlantic Ocean. although the island suggests it's the Pacific, so maybe that's what it is. Anyway, off the coast of Africa. That's exotic. If that's not exotic enough for you, I don't know what else how we can make you happy. There's a great. He's traveling with his father. I think this dad's played by Hoyt Axton. Is that right?
It is indeed Hoyt Axton. Yes.
Great. Weird role for him. The movie's really clever in that Kelly Reno, the little boy, it's all shot from his point of view. So even when we're on the ship, everything we see is from Kelly Reno vision. So it's all him overhearing things. You see the mid-riffs of people as they're passing by, like you experience things like a kid would from those camera angles and stuff. And it's really, really great. There's this fantastic scene where after a big night at an informal poker game, Hoyt comes back to talk to his son and just show him all these bits of junk and money and stuff that he won at this poker game with this sheik who's traveling with this horse that has a great deal of anxiety being on the ship, and that they've sort of observed kind of fighting with the handlers down in the decks below. And his dad's just like trying to decide which things his kid can have, and I'm going to keep that, and I'm going to keep this and stuff, and I think it's time you had your own knife, so I'm going to give you this knife that he wins, and it's super cool. I'm not a real outdoorsy kid, so these movies are, in a way, they're like, well, why do they appeal to me at all? I'm not really sure, but in a way, they're like, wow, this is how I go to the North Pole. This is how I get stranded on a desert island. This is how I do it, is through the movies. So maybe that's why. But I can just say that, and I think Joel can back me up on this, when you first get a knife, it's a big deal. For a little boy, it's a big deal that you have this thing that's like you know what I mean? Even though the knife that he's got is pretty small and it's relatively harmless, it's still, it's a rite of passage, and it's a big moment in that scene. And Hoyt's kind of drunk. It's just really good, mostly Western actor who's just really great in this scene. And the kid is just allowed to be a kid in a great way, even all the way to the end, even when we get back to civilization where it's tougher to maintain that.
Yeah.
The ship hits an iceberg. No, it doesn't, but something happens. Doesn't hit an iceberg off the coast of Africa, but something happens. They don't really know. We're not privy to it because he's not privy to it. And there's this it's fantastic. I guess it's modest by today's standards if you were going to do the same sequence now, but it's really like you're in the water, this film is, and all these films are very, very careful with the wildlife and stuff. So this film has the no animals were harmed, but it's hard watching this ship going down at sea sequence and to think that they weren't at least traumatized a little bit. There's a right. shot, and it's not in slow motion, but it's this magical, weird shot where it first goes into the water, and under the water, you see it just this horse, this weird image of this thing that's incongruous and not supposed to be underwater, like turning all the way around in front of our eyes,
right, before
it can kind of naturally sort of sticks its head up above the surface. And as it does, we see the what's the back of the ship called? Not the bow.
The
stern. This particular ship goes down nose first, so we see the stern of the ship up, and we don't really see it. It's a big production item, but they don't really show it. You're in the water with these guys when all this is happening.
Yeah.
And then it cuts to black and you wake up on the beach. Everybody does it that way. So that's not surprising, but the film for the next 25 minutes has no dialogue in it. It's a boy and a horse on a desert island figuring out how to survive together. And it's extraordinary visual storytelling. The film was shot by Caleb Deschanel as a young man who was a very stylized and ambitious cinematographer, still is, but was really Ballard never made a movie before. He knew the kinds of things he wanted to see, but the two of them had a really, really strong collaboration. He said that Caleb taught him that you should be open to capturing magic. And he said that in the editing bay, when they were putting the movie together, Deschanel had shot all this stuff that he didn't even know he was running camera for. And a ton of that made it in the film because it just made the thing feel so true and spontaneous and otherworldly in a way that they really wanted to capture. The two most famous scenes because the horse is tangled up in the stuff and the panicked horse that you have to rescue. Again, this is almost a cliche at this point, but that's a great scene. The scene where they're getting to know each other and they're basically on the beach and they're just playing. Like, it starts out where the horse doesn't want to be touched or the horse whatever, but it becomes this fun game. It's like a dance, like they're playing tag. But it's just beautiful, and it's captured with the sunset in the background. I mean, I just don't know how to explain how amazing it is. I get how a cynical movie suit in the disco era looked at this thing and said, "What is this?
Right?
What is this? It just can't just sit. Are we going to be on this island the whole time? You know, such stupidity and cynicism."
The quote was, "What is this? An art film for kids?"
It is exactly what it is. It's an art film for kids. It really is. What's wrong with that? I mean, it's weird. It's so acclaimed now that it's weird that they were just like, man, we're not going to release it, man. Plus, it's United Artists, which why wouldn't you release it? Of all people, like, I don't know. It came out the year, it made them a bunch of money, and then Heaven's Gate came out the next year and crushed them like a tin can.
Yep.
Which is an art film for nobody. I know that movie's like had some sort of resurgence and people appreciate it now. There's some arresting things in it, but that movie
we've talked about it. Yeah, we've talked about it in a previous episode.
Yeah, we'll talk about it again too, because it's a behemoth of Hollywood failure that just whose story needs to be told again and again. So it just shows you how wrong studio people are, and how when you're right as a storyteller, there's a real magic to that. And when you're uncompromising as a storyteller, like Carroll Ballard is, real movie magic can happen. And Black Stallion is, when I ranked these, I had it number one, but having watched them again, it's really hard to pick one. You know what I mean? And that's where I've kind of come down, where I don't feel like I can really choose a favorite here. It's tough because I have my own sentimental favorite, and then, you know, you'll hear. So anyway, it gets rescued, and there's this great.
His most acclaimed, certainly his most acclaimed film.
Yeah, maybe his next one's pretty close too, and his fourth one's really, really quite acclaimed as well. But yes, I think it is. It's the movie that was up for all the Oscars. It's the film he built an entire career of this kind of film on.
Yeah.
So, and you couldn't have done that if you didn't have a big hit that was considered a bona fide classic at some point. And he had it at the best point you can have it, which was right out of the gate. That's good. So kid gets rescued, and it's by these fishermen, and they try and rescue him without the horse. And there's this great sequence where the kid's insisting the horse come, and the horse is freaking out, and it basically makes it a go, and finally the fishermen are like, okay, they don't want to let the horse drown. So they rig their stuff together and lift this big horse up on this ship. It's pretty awesome. It's weird. The first time that you think, oh, he's rescued, and usually that's a triumphant moment in a Trapped on a Desert Island movie, and this one's just full of trauma and everyone disagreeing with what's best in the moment. And of course, these fishermen who are, I don't know what language they're speaking, but they're not communicating. They get it, but they're not communicating in a useful way. So the solution has to become apparent to them before they do anything. It's neat. I like that bit. I remember the dance on the beach. Obviously, that's an iconic thing. I remember his learning to ride the horse and that triumphant, charge that they have, where he throws his arms up and stuff.
Breaking all of the rules, he wins illegally.
Yeah, well, that hasn't happened yet, but on the beach, yes.
Oh, on the beach, yes, sure.
Yeah. Then he gets home, and does this feel like the 40s to you? I know there's an old style car or two in this. It feels like such a 1979 movie to me.
Yeah.
Terry Garr plays such a 1979 sort of mom. You know, and she's great in it, so don't get me wrong, but I feel like that sense of in the 40s when you're on the steamer passenger ship or trapped on a desert island, like easily done. Yeah. When they get back to civilization, it's tougher, and I'm not sure they really quite pull that off. I mean, that sense of time, which I think is important to the story, because I think horses in American culture were more important then, basically. It wasn't the Old West or anything, but Joel sort of gets what I'm saying. If you see the movie, you'll sort of understand what I'm saying too. I don't remember the convoluted set of events, and I just watched the movie, but I knew I'd run into these sort of plot problems. Like I say, this film's from the kid's point of view, so how the horse gets into the custody of so-and-so and how it's in this barn at this time when these people bump into each other, like all that was a little confusing to me because I think it was all done off screen, but his horse isn't his own, and he's sneaking in to visit it basically, and he bumps into an old retired jockey who now just takes care of horses, played by Mickey Rooney. And Oscar nominated role for sure. It was nominated. Yeah. Did he win? I don't think so.
No, he didn't win.
I think it was who was nominated this year. It was like Robert Duvall for Apocalypse Now, and so this was a murderous row of nominations.
Yeah, he was nominated, and this was nominated for editing. It won a special achievement for sound editing.
I believe it. Because you actually hear the live audio. They found a way to capture the sound of a horse race from beneath a horse. And even this many years later, with all the modern sound tools that we have and all the bombastic, surround sound like films that we sit through these days, that them capturing the real audio of that in real time is super powerful. That's getting ahead of ourselves, but that I can see movie, why. He
was nominated that year real quick. Melvin Douglas, Justin Henry, Robert Duvall, Frederick Forrest. Melvin Douglas won for Being There.
Yeah, Melvin Douglas is great Being There, but Napalm in the Morning, baby, all the way for me. Even though the kind of role that used to win would have been Rooney's. I mean, that if he were nominated today in this part at this age, and he was this kind of golden age Hollywood style guy, nobody would have had a chance against that. Douglas in a similar kind of movie is a similar kind of cat, but I don't know. So Oscars are fun. It's really.
We'll save it. Yeah, we'll save it for the Oscar show.
It's a stunning visual feast too. The cinematography in it is off the hook good, and it wasn't even nominated. Which, Deschanel has a quote about that. It was like, "Well, are you sad that you weren't nominated?" And he goes, "Well, yeah, because everybody kept telling me that I was going to be nominated, and then they told me that I should be nominated. So now I'm getting sad." But he goes, "I don't know. I'm just this guy doing what he loves. Like, I think that's pretty great. So I'm not going to get too depressed about it." Was basically, that's me dramatically paraphrasing Caleb. He's one of the all-time best old school cinematographers of this generation. He's not breaking any rules. He just understands the language of cinema so well that he's able to capture the magic in the best moments. Think of The Natural. That's as well shot a movie as you'll ever see. It's incredible, and yet it's an old timey story. And they used him a lot for this throughout the years because he really got the language of old cinema, and he could make these Ghostbusters era things feel old and traditional and in a way that other people working at the time really couldn't. And this film has that in spades. I think it's just a little too low budget to give you any big establishing shots that show that you're in the 40s. There's also that weird line where he comes back and he's trying to be nice and he's like, can I like mow the lawn or do the dishes or whatever? And Terry's like, sure, yeah, why don't you dust the tables and do the vacuuming in here too while you're at it or whatever. It just feels so modern. So I don't know. Yeah, that's my one hang up with Black Stallion. It's nitpicking though.
Yep. Let's move on to his next film, which was
you got to talk about how the thing ends, right? Sorry.
Well, I mean, we've just been talking about this film for a long time.
But it's important.
So, well, he teaches him how to ride, and he rides.
He rides in a big horse race at the end.
He rides in a big horse race at the end.
But that's. I didn't want to I don't want to spoil the movie, and I don't want to totally skip what the big thing in the movie is that he with this mentor played by Mickey Rooney, like, learn about horses together in what their place is in the modern world and not in a desert island world, and eventually tricks his way into being a jockey in a big horse race, which I've never understood again quite why that's even needed, really, except that it is kind of magical and neat that they pull off that little trick. But yeah, I don't know, why are they so determined to do it? That part was never really clear to me. It's like a kid gets an idea in his head and just wills it to happen. It's such a great kids movie in that way, in that everything's from this little boy's point of view and it's all driven by his force of will. So sorry, dude, I just didn't want to stop with a third of it left and at least not comment on a little bit of something.
Yeah.
The horse race is incredible too. It's really, really well captured and very immediate, just like the ship's is.
I think it's there's really no reason why they are in
except they can. Yeah, right. Exactly. There's no real driving thing. It's not like if they win the race, he gets to keep the horse or some dumb shit like that would be in a movie today. There's nothing like that driving this ending, which makes it all the more ludicrous. It's like Rooney's character comes along, is pretty standoffish with this kid, but sort of becomes a kid again, and the two of them hatch this plot, and for its own sake, and it's very childlike in that way, which is very, very cool. So.
Yep, and that's all. Anyway,
art film for children. That dipshit in United Artists had it exactly right. And what's wrong with that? Nothing, as it turns out.
Never Cry Wolf was his next film, and it's
4 years later.
4 years later, Charles Martin Smith, who maybe people might know him best from The Untouchables. Maybe, but and from this movie, I mean, he's really good in Never Cry Wolf. The synopsis real quick. A government researcher sent to research the menace of wolves in the north learns about the true beneficial and positive nature of the species. And Charles Martin Smith, Brian Dennehy.
This movie's so good. It's why having watched this again, I'm like, wow, no, this is the best one. No, it must be Black Stallion's the best one. I don't know, whatever.
Yep.
We don't. Why choose?
Based on the incredible true story. Yep.
We have them both, kind of based on a real expedition. Although there's a lot of stuff in it that's very metaphorical and stuff. But I mean, it's just a real experience. The caribou herds were disappearing, and humans, the Nature Society, who really didn't understand wolves, and we still don't really understand them very well. They make a point like that, I don't know if it's this movie or some other movie, but I've been out in the woods. I've been out here. I know there are wolves because I've seen their tracks. I've seen the evidence that they've been hunting. I've heard their cries at night, and yet I've never seen one with my own eyes. And if somebody were to have, it would have been me. And that's sort of the kind of species you're talking about. They're a total mystery. And it was assumed that these ravenous wolves were just taking out caribou like cowboys were shooting buffalo off the back of a rail car, back when we were heading west. Like the idea of that is even now it's crazy stupid. But this wasn't the military or the government sending them out there. It was a government funded expedition, but this was a scientific theory that he was sent to go figure out, to see what they should do about this imbalance in nature. And he shows up on a train to a really cold outpost town with his giant, huge crates of stuff, which to get him out to where the caribou and the buffalo are, he has to fly in this ice landing plane owned and piloted by Brian Dennehy's character. The flight out there is fantastic scene. I mean, Dennehy, first of all, it's another film that has these huge long passages without any talking. Although the one knock I have against, and it's not a knock because it's really, really well done for this, but this movie is a nonstop sort of voiceover journal entry by our main character. That is a way to do this, if you want to get into his thoughts. And the movie does know when to shut up. It doesn't just do that. I shouldn't use the word nonstop, but it just feels to me like the guy we see going through the trials and tribulations of adjusting to life alone in the Arctic, and the philosopher that we hear writing these words and speaking this stuff as he's doing it, don't always feel super congruous together. And they rob the thing of a bit of growth, character growth, and momentum that I think we could have just experienced. We spent half an hour on the desert island with a boy and a horse. We can certainly spend it in the up on the ice shelf with the caribou and the wolves. Shouldn't be a problem. But the fun thing about Dennehy is that he's a talker, and he just keeps asking questions and talking and joking, and he's used to danger. This old plane doesn't look like it could carry anything. And of course, he can't carry even half the stuff he brought with him. And it's random which stuff they dump off the plane, which stuff he keeps on the plane. When after he's landed and he's out there on this frozen lake with his stuff in the middle of the lake with no shelter, no nothing, he's going through what he has. And he's got 2 crates of food, and they're both full of canned beans. That's all that's in them. Canned green beans, string beans. So not even baked beans. Not that I like baked beans, but at least that you could have eaten right out of the can if you could have just warmed it up to some degree. Whereas string beans, I don't know what you do with those. I guess you eat them out of the can too, frozen. Yeah, it's funny. The misadventure is the adventure in the early goings of this thing. And Charles Martin Smith, from Untouchables, from Starman, is another great performance that he gives.
Oh yeah.
Of this era, he was our buddy Bill, a listener of the show, and a really good friend of mine and a good movie buddy of mine from way back, from kindergarten, said that he and Dennehy both are great together because they're both character actors who, through this era, mostly played leading men for whatever weird reason.
Right.
But there's so much character between the two of them, which is great, and it pays off later. But as you'd expect, he kind of learns to live in the wilderness. He learns to live off of only eating rats, which he comes to learn is mostly what the wolves are doing as well. There's tons and tons of rats. I don't know what rats being sort of carrion of a kind. I'm not sure what they're living off of specifically. But of course, if you show up with a crate of canned beans and there's anything new, whatever it is, the flies, the rats, they will find you because they just know there's stuff over here that wasn't here before. And nature knows that instinctively. But it becomes this story about him being adopted essentially into this wolf pack. He's supposed to observe them. He can't find them. And eventually they just show up at his door. And the wolves and the interaction between man and wolf in this film, it's just extraordinary. Again, what they're able to discover. There's no chance that they could have written a bunch of wolf stuff and then expected even these trained wolves to really do it. There's definitely these highlights that we get through, but I've talked about it before. Animals in movies should be animals. It was why it was my one defense of Prancer from a couple of years ago, which Joel really didn't like. And I get why he didn't like it. But the one great thing about it is that Prancer is played by a reindeer who's just a reindeer and isn't taking direction. And it's hitting its mark, but it's just an animal that is doing animal things. And the way we interact with an animal,
you're not getting the animatronic reindeer head turning to camera perfectly. And
this movie shares a lot. There's a movie later that really shares a lot, but this movie shares a lot in common with Call of the Wild, which they just made, which is lovely, with Harrison Ford and essentially a digital dog. And the digital dog's great, and digital dog can save people, and it can just do everything that you write on a paper. And it's even really well realized, but it's still a digital dog with all these digital dog reactions. There's no weird dogness to it that would make it an actual true dog in front of your eyes. Right. And it kills the thing in a way. In a way, it survives in spite of it, but it just... What is it to be a dog? You know, I was sitting here listening to Steely Dan, and my cat attacked my head for no reason. I don't think it likes Steely Dan, but I'm not really sure what is going on because it's a cat who's weird and does crazy things. I had a dog who really liked Supertramp. That's weird. I mean, I like Supertramp too, so I guess you can sort of personify it, but animals are weird, and this movie captures that. Weird, wild, amazing. He develops relationships with the couple of native people that he bumps into up there that help him out and basically teach him how to survive, or he probably would not have made it. Everybody back in civilization thinks he's long gone. Before fate decides that he stumbles into Dennehy's character with a hunting party later in the film. There's this amazing sequence where the caribou, he's taking a nap, he's like bathed in the lake and he's taking a nap naked, and the caribou appear, and he runs with the wolf pack amongst the caribou, who basically chase these caribou so that the weakest one reveals itself to them, and that's the one they take down. So even though there is a scene where wolves take out caribou in the film, where that's the premise, is where the wolves are killing all the caribou, right? You see by the way they hunt and how they do it and what they conserve, and that it's no chance that it's the wolves that are causing the problems. It's almost certainly, like it always is in nature, it's us that's causing the problems. It's a magical movie. It's shot by Hiro. I can't remember the name of the guy.
Give me a
but
second.
Cinematography is really important in these films, and what this guy does is kind of amazing. The wolf pack and the animal handlers too. Amazing work by them.
Hiro Narita. And once again, the sound on this, because he was or this movie was nominated for best sound. Again, the capturing of the sounds of nature for this one.
Carmine Coppola came in as a ringer when Francis Coppola became involved in Black Stallion as a composer, and does this beautiful old-fashioned sort of Arabian styled score to the Black Stallion. Mark Isham did Never Cry Wolf, and it's an electronic score, but it's mixed with playing what are reels, and it's also mixed for sort of comedy effect, but it's also mixed with like real Eskimo styled noises and stuff. It's an incredible score. It's sort of Mark's. He's done lots of great work through the years, but to me, this is like his signature work because it brings that all the ethnic influences into something that is yet modern and also electronic in a lot of ways that is magical. So it's Never Cry Wolf's a really, really good film. It's so good. It's a family film. It's stunning that Disney disowned this, and it's such an orphan movie of theirs. Never, right. It had a CD release that was full frame only. It's never had a Blu-ray release. It never played on Disney Plus or any place like that. You could rent it from Amazon, which was where I saw it, at least in widescreen. But the print is old and aged, and I don't know that matters so much as just what. I get why, Black Hole or Watcher in the Woods or something wasn't, didn't do big business and it was supposed to. This movie's exactly what it promises in every way. It's brilliant and loved by everyone who's seen it. And I just don't understand why it should be one of the heroes of their catalog, especially from this era.
Right.
And it just isn't. And I don't get it.
So there's quite a gap here between
83 and 92.
83 and 92, and he is back in 92 with Matthew Modine and Jennifer Grey. No animals in this one except the animal of nature that is wind.
Wind. This film was in development from 1983 till now. In 1983, the America's Cup yacht race was finally lost by America after 100+ years or whatever. It was the longest winning streak in any sport. And while they were making, while Never Cry Wolf was in release, that was lost. And then in 87 at the next down in Australia, because it's still America's Cup, but it sort of defaults to the cup of the place that last won. The Americans went down and reclaimed it. And that's the inspiration for this story, is the shame of losing this cherished bit of history and stuff, and how you find your way back to victory and redemption and interpersonally and from a sporting standpoint. But it's much tougher than these two absolute underdog stories that we just watched, because yachting, even when you're the underdog, is still a multi-million-dollar enterprise. It's yachting is done by yachtsmen who are from Newport, Rhode Island, and own giant mansions and have trillions of dollars and are at liberty to just give a shit about yachting in a way. All that is difficult to relate to. The movie does a really great job of giving us two kids sort of on the cusp of that world that we can identify with. Their romantic issues and their personal ambitions, but it's still a weird world that it would be hard to capture on film. And the film parodies it to some degree. It knows how strange and eccentric these cats are, but it also captures in a way that I wouldn't have thought possible, in a way they wouldn't even try now, what it is like to be in these competitive races, to be hanging off the top of a mast trying to fix a sail while somebody's coming down your neck, the way the crews work together, the muscle that it takes just to do this stuff, and the chess match between you and another captain of another ship. And it all of that is on screen without, there's a little bit of it, but but there's a little bit of this is how sailing works, but there's very little of that in the film for what it ends up being, and for how much you sort of understand intrinsically about it by the time the big ending moments come, and you have to be able to follow what's going on. The film does a great job of explaining that to you. But losing the cup, that's a big deal. Matthew Modine plays the head tactician on America, it's called the Radiance in the film, but it would have been America 1, the top boat that America sent to the race. And you go through, it's several races you have to go through with several trials. It goes on for months. It's this huge thing. And if you get to ever watch it on TV, it's one of the greatest. The boats, it's great that Wind captures an era of yacht racing that was the same for years and years, because now it's totally different. These things are like spaceships. They don't look the same. Yeah. The way ships are made now, they're more catamaran in style, and they feel completely foreign to anything we are used to. But if you ever stumble across it, I don't know where, but on cable. I've stumbled across it sometimes. It's one of the great HD sports that you could watch on TV. It's thrilling and exciting how they cover it and just how it looks. It's so amazing being out at sea and with these things chasing each other around and circling around each other and stuff. Like, I admit the movie to a large degree, but also just seeing Olympic sailing, which is something that the networks never. There's like 40 sailing events at the Olympics, and they never show any of them on TV unless like, oh, it's the first Aboriginal Australian, and then they show the award ceremony or something. But it's a hard thing to capture because you can't be on the ship. And the thing that the movie does amazingly well is it puts you right on the boat. Modine plays a character who gives up everything to follow this dream of winning the America's Cup, the top thing you can do as a sailor. He gives up his girlfriend, who's an engineer, who has already given up sort of her own ambitions to follow him around in his dream. And that's a big... Jennifer Grey is great in this movie. And it's because it's... The movie, it demands that she be everything. She has to be the cute girlfriend. She has to be the genius engineer. She's got to be all this stuff that Hollywood's like, you're everything. A guy wrote this thing, and he's like, here is the perfect woman. And then she's even upstaged by Rebecca Miller later in the movie, who plays this quirky, weird, another actor I really love who hardly acted in anything. She's Arthur Miller's daughter. She's Mrs. Daniel Day-Lewis now. She's a playwright and a writer now. She doesn't act anymore. She's genius in this. Stellan Skarsgård, who plays an aeronautics engineer that catches the racing bug, is also funny. And it's really those four people and their relationship and how they bicker and fight and sort of find a way to design a boat and raise the money to do it, to get back in this thing. Because Cliff Robertson, who was the yachtsman, who was the keeper of the cup for all these years, absolutely loses his mind when he loses the thing. He goes into hiding. He goes into the sort of Howard Hughes like existence back in the mansion. And he's drawn out by the end. And I guess if we're talking about actors, special consideration to Jack, who's the Australian
Thompson.
guy. Jack Thompson, from Breaker Morant and a whole host of other things. Fantastic character actor who plays the Australian captain who wins the cup and that they go to battle with at the end. He's great. And Peter Montgomery, too, because the racing sequences, they actually went and got Australia's yachting announcer, who's an iconic dude, and he brings so much verisimilitude and character to the announcing and the following the race, because he really is the guy explaining it to us at home with computer graphics and like he would on a TV broadcast, and it just works a lot. So I don't know what to say. I like these stories because these four characters in particular are complicated. Modine's hero is he's as traditional as they get, and yet he's complicated, and their relationship is complicated. The engineering and the magic of being out on the ocean and in the desert, it's all captured in a great romantic way. This film came out a couple weeks after the LA riots. Nobody was seeing movies during that era. It completely disappeared, basically without a trace. It was years and years in the making. Again, Francis Coppola had to sort of step in and help this thing along and get to the finish line, no pun intended. And it's corny. Basil Poledouris does the music, and his music is big and bombastic and thematic and extremely musical, which I appreciate. As music, it's great. It's almost, and I hate to say this because I rail against modern film music, and it's at the way it's dictated to be nothing more than moans and groans in the background, but it's so musical, it's almost obtrusive. But I just can't. The sailing sequences, and I think if you're an empathetic person, you sort of catch these people's despair and their dream, and you feel their connection to one another and their love for one another. I think it's really, really well performed in that way. The screenwriter who wrote it is a really unique guy. What's his name? And if you can, click on it so we can mention a couple other weird things that he's done, so you get a sense that even though this film is a conventional sports movie and it's told with that structure, it's every chance it gets to be unconventional and odd, it takes. Yeah. And that's brave and fun, and it starts with the writing.
So the writing, we have 3 story by credits, and Jeff Benjamin, Roger Vaughn, and Kimball Livingston, and then you get screenplay by Rudy Wurlitzer and Mac Gudgeon.
It's Rudy Wurlitzer that I'm talking about. It has his style, so click on his name.
He's best known for things like Coming Home. He's an uncredited writer on Coming Home. Walker, Voyager, Wind, Shadow of the Wolf, Little Buddha, the Penal
Shadow
Colony.
of the Wolf. Go back. There's a really big one before Coming Home. Is it Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid?
Yeah, Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid. Yeah.
All right. If you're a big film fan like me, maybe you don't know Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid. We talked about Coming Home earlier. Mm-hmm. There's although he was brought in as a kind of ringer to polish that one up, that has a lot of him in it, as does Pat Garrett, as does Wind. And I love Wind. I wouldn't pick it over either Black Stallion or Never Say Never. In fact, I put it as 4th on my list. But I think it's a braver, more unconventional film than the next film, which is more of a flat-out crowd pleaser. Mm-hmm. And I think it should be admired for that. It's not easy to make a yacht racing movie. Why they even thought to do it is weird. And yet I think despite its flaws, it's hard to imagine a better yacht racing movie existing.
Right.
Truly, it's really hard to imagine them hitting it harder than they did on this film. So I dig it very much. Joel, you've seen this. I'm doing all the talking. Do you see what I'm saying?
I liked Wind. Wind was the movie that you. I think this goes all the way back to our college days, where you're like, this is we got to check this movie out. You'll dig it, and yeah, it's super fun. There was a point. Yacht racing and the America's Cup had a good run for a while in the public consciousness, in the sports public consciousness.
It took losing for it to matter again for a while. And this came out right at the end of that, I think, right in the America Cubed era, which was in the press and was a thing that people followed to some degree.
Yeah. And so it was really good. And again, Matthew Modine's great. Jennifer Grey is great. So it's a lovely movie. So we should mention, though, Carroll Ballard did also do a version of The Nutcracker in between
1980. So it wasn't as big. 86, 87. So it wasn't quite as long till his next movie. Uh-huh. I couldn't find a way to watch Nutcracker, so we should mention it for sure, because what an interesting filmmaker and project. Like, I would really like to see that. And I had a tough time finding it.
The art for this version of Nutcracker was done by Maurice Sendak. Oh my God, I shouldn't have started the sentence without remembering what it is that I'm talking about. Where the Wild Things Are. Jeez.
Yeah.
So I was like, what is that? His big famous book. Yeah. So it's based on that. And
my understanding is very stagey, as you would expect a Nutcracker version to be, because it's a ballet after all. But that, from a design standpoint and everything, it's really wonderful, and that they capture the dancing really, really great.
Yeah, that's what I understand too. So then we have the break from 86 to 92 was to Wind, and then from Wind we got 92. 4 years later we get Anna Paquin, Jeff Daniels, Dana Delaney, and Fly Away Home.
Fly Away Home. All right, millennials, you've seen this one, right? Everybody's seen this one.
Yeah, this one is one that it seems like right on the, like, this would be a family film that everyone would watch.
That everyone, at least from that era, would have been tough to miss, because this was really, really popular. Of course, I didn't see it. I was an old adult and I missed this, and I only saw it for the first time a few years back.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, Carroll Ballard did that? I should probably get that. And I did. So, and then I saw it for the second time here this week. And this is a really cool movie too. Like, really, again, really lets itself be discovered, and it's got sort of the right people to inhabit a world like that, particularly Paquin, but Daniels, I think, too, to another degree, and Terry Kinney, too, who's this movie's sidekick clown character who's pretty improvisational and fun, which you don't normally see him in that mode. It was fun to watch him that way. But it's really Paquin and this flock of geese that think she's their mom. And I'm sure all that was staged and set up and planned. I mean, they know where to point the camera, but it all just feels so. It just feels so authentic and real in the way that a 13-year-old girl and a bunch of geese would interact, and it's brilliant in that way. I love that. What does she say? She doesn't honk at him. She says, "Hey, hey, 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 hey." That's how she gets their attention. It really weird. Again, another sort of arresting sequence. The movie starts with the credits rolling over a car accident from inside the car in sort of slow motion, where she's loses her mom in New Zealand. Anna Paquin, if you don't know, is a Canadian who was moved to and was born and raised in New Zealand. In this movie, she plays a New Zealander who's brought back to be raised in Canada. So it's kind of, if you like those sorts of bits of coincidental trivia, that's a neat one. She loses her mom and is also really, really severely hurt in the accident. She wakes up several weeks later in the hospital with her father standing over her. We could just and she does this great thing where she's talking to him. He's trying to get her talking, but he's talking to him, but she's putting it together. What's happened? Why is he here? He shouldn't be here for this. Something's gone really, really wrong. And it's like, it's all happening in Anna's face. I give her a hard time for the piano because she won an Oscar for that, which I always thought was like, come on. Plus, I'm still pissed. It was the only Oscar I got wrong that whole season. The only one. I had almost that would have been the year. It was easy because it was Schindler's List years, so there were a lot of them that were obvious. But man, I thought Winona Ryder should have won for Age of Innocence. But the reality is that audiences don't look at Winona Ryder in Age of Innocence and see a great performance because there's so little going on there, and yet that's what's so brilliant about it. That's what's so brilliant about it. Whereas Anna is just standing on a bunch of logs screaming to the heavens in a film with another Oscar-winning actress who doesn't say a word the whole time. And I just thought, what a cheat. That's too easy. You guys are just going for the easy stuff. Even though The Piano is not exactly an easy movie to sit through, I've always resented it. And my resentment has come up, but The Piano's brilliant. Anna's really great in it. She's got to hold stage in that film for giant swaths of time, and it's a challenge for a kid to do. In this film, thankfully, she doesn't play the yappy, talkative kid. She's just very reserved, very distrusting. But these geese bring her back to life. Her maternal instincts kick in, her protectiveness, her sense of adventure, all of that. And it's magical to watch, and the film does discover it in a truthful way, and it's there for us. So once this crazy plan hatches that we're gonna take these little mechanical single prop planes and fly these geese south for the winter so that they can join other geese and live like geese. I can't remember what they said, but it's like you can clip their wings and keep them locked up in the barn, but then that's not a life for them at all. That's supposedly what's at stake here. There's a mean, although he's not really mean. Again, it's shot very much like Black Stallion from a little girl's point of view. So he just seems like a really mean park ranger guy who's coming to get the geese and to do all this awful stuff with them. And there's and Dana Delaney beat out literally every famous person in Hollywood. It's kind of fun to go back to a time when Dana could do that, because that little window didn't last very long for her, unfortunately. But she's great in this. She was pretty good in all these little things that she did. But Hollywood's not really nice to you if you don't make big hit after big hit after big hit. And Jeff Daniels continues on, but Dana Delaney just goes, go back to television and be somebody's mom or something, basically, is what they told her at some point. She's great in it. It's great, man. That journey, the adventure of them in these little planes when they have to emergency land at the Air Force base, and the Air Force is about to scuttle a bunch of F-15s down or whatever. Right. And the scene where they're being interrogated, and outside the door, the other pilots are like playing with the geese and stuff is so cute. And the scene where they accidentally show up in Baltimore, downtown Baltimore, because they kind of stop paying attention for a while, it's amazing. Like, it's really just incredible. It has this terrible, I don't know what you call it. The film has this terrible moment. It's the only bad moment in the whole movie, where this announcer comes on and they're like, nah. They're sort of talking heads like, and you've never seen a bigger collection of tree huggers and hippies and whatever and blah, blah, blah. And that it pits this thing on this big battle scale of stupidity that the ending really just is dumb. And I can't. Right. I get why it's there. It has metaphorical and thematic value for sure. And you need a big ending. Them just landing and the geese going off with other geese isn't enough. So I understand why it's there, but I find the ending tough to swallow. At the same time, Fly Away Home, super magical. I really, really like it. Everybody does really, really great work. Jeff Daniels does a great job of doing the best that he can with this kid that he doesn't know. And you see instantly why he's not around and why he wasn't a father. He's way too big a flake. And yet the world, and he plays all that. That's not easy stuff to embrace about a character. You know what I mean? He all that comes across. What's great about this guy and what's terrible about him all in one package. It's just a very human thing on screen, and his understanding that he has his moment, but this is her movie. He's also the perfect actor to sort of put in that seat, to understand the bigger story in a way that a big movie star probably wouldn't get. So I love it. I love the way it's made. It's I can't remember who shot it again. Is it
well, let's hold on. I went
away from just a couple credits, and then we'll move on to the last movie. Sorry.
I want to say that this one actually was
Deschanel again.
So Deschanel, and I think he was nominated for this one. Yeah, he was nominated for an Academy Award for Fly Away Home.
He's amazing, and this is an amazing looking movie. It really is, even though it's deceptively amazing. I mean, because it has a natural aspect to it, but not the same way. It's not the wonder of the unknown that we're dealing with here at all. Right. It's the connection between a person and their animals, and it's about them coming to an understanding that these things are more than your pets, and her embracing her responsibility to them is really magical and wonderful. Yeah, and Anna's
get that.
Fantastic in it.
Yeah, we get that with his final film as well. This one, that same sort of the responsibility. This isn't a pet. This is a partner. That sort of thing, kind of like the Black Stallion, and that is Duma. An orphaned cheetah becomes the best friend of a young boy living in South Africa.
I wish I'd have seen this before I saw these other people adopt wild animals as pets films. So there's been a whole bunch of them lately. Younger generations, I won't call you out by name, but they're really super into that idea that if dinosaurs were back, you could just have a dinosaur as a pal. I don't know where that came from. It's asinine. I hate it. And I don't really like that it's in movies either. This movie's not like that, but it follows that structure almost to a T. Because they do find an orphaned cheetah who's been killed. His family's been killed by a pack of lions in South Africa is where this takes place.
Right.
And so you can have a white kid and this sort of Huckleberry Finn like story that takes place. Campbell Scott and Hope Davis play his folks, and Campbell Scott's a bit of a naturalist and has a lot of animals around in his life, and is sort of showing him the ways with this creature before he tragically passes away. And then all hell breaks loose. Mom doesn't know how to deal with it. Like that person that was holding this weird puzzle together is gone. And he's still got this cheetah as a pet, and the cheetah loves him, and the cheetah follows him to school one day, which causes all kinds of terrifying chaos and madness. And they send the animal control people, which South Africa has a lot of this, even in the city, out to get the thing and to put it down because it doesn't have a life as a pet. Maybe a zoo would take it. That's a thing. But of course, the little boy doesn't want it to go to a zoo at all, or a circus or something. So he goes on the lamb. Monkey on the Lamb, special cheetah edition. That is what Duma is. And he hooks up with this sort of traveling fisherman, boatsman guy played by Eamon Walker. Great performance by Eamon Walker. Again, the film, like all save one of these, is from the child's point of view very much. So even though this guy, we as an audience think he's pretty sure he's on the level, he also really needs the money and would love to sell this cheetah.
Yeah.
And suggests it to the kid several times. And of course, that makes our hero, who needs help to go on this odyssey, makes him very, very distrusting of him. And a whole bunch of weird things happen, some super weird. There's some really unnecessary, like coincidental style drama in this. You know, at one point, Iman's character gets injured and he gets nursed back to health by this tribe. And then we find out way after the fact that they were his family all along. And I'm always like, what?
Yeah.
What kind of reveal is that? Like, why did you wait on that? That's just weird to me.
Mm-hmm.
That, you know, this has a bunch of moments like that I find sort of hackneyed and sloppy. But the South African bush and the river adventure and a boy and his pet cheetah, you know, all of that is really, really well served by the story. I just found it. I found that as ludicrous as Black Stallion is, I could buy into it. I found this almost impossible to buy into. I could only really appreciate it as a family entertainment that is kind of BS. And I find that it's a bummer that that's his last film. But at the same time, people weren't making movies like this. This movie has a really, really good Tomatoes score. And the reason for that, the way you get really outlandishly good Tomatoes scores, sometimes just because you're awesome, but mostly you get them because nobody can really find anything that objectionable to you. And a lot of movies that are pretty good, and we've discussed this phenomena before, get terrible tomato scores because even though nobody really hated them, it was hard to find someone who was an actual fan of it.
Right.
That doesn't make it a piece of crap, but because you're at 49 instead of 51, your tomatoes go that way. And if you're at 52 or whatever, like Duma, your tomatoes go the other way. It's just tomatoes.
Yep.
But it's worth mentioning that this film feels beloved, but it doesn't have the quality behind it that I see. At the same time, it was another movie where they were like, they didn't release it. They didn't want to put it out in theaters. It tested poorly with test audiences. It's a film. It's even though, as I say, there've been a lot of them lately, this one doesn't push the easy button over and over and over again emotionally. And because of that, it's complicated in a way that should be celebrated. And yet that was sort of its doom when it came out, was that, yeah, the cheetah's cute, the kid's cute, the relationships are fine, but it's just not heartstringy or triumph of the human spirit enough for anybody's taste who might want to watch a movie like that. Right. And Ballard, hung up the gloves after this film for that reason, because it's just like, Joel, read the quote, the whole quote. We've talked about discovering the story.
Yeah, his quote is, it used to be that if you made a good film that really worked on a lot of levels, that was the most important thing. Now you got to sell people with a soundbite. There's no time for people to discover movies anymore. And I'm just gonna I'm gonna add. He has another quote here. The film business seems like it's kind of moving away from possibility. And I think that's a really and that's that. I mean, it sounds a little bit like old man yells at cloud. But it also
backed up with his work.
Yeah, but and also it's like he also recognizes the movies that interest me that I would want to make, there's no audience for them, or there might not be or there certainly isn't a production house for that anymore. No. And so it's not necessarily it's not a forced retirement. I think it's just he realized, this business is not for me anymore. He probably still could make a pretty great movie if given the resources.
I'm certain of it.
He still has the show, but he doesn't necessarily have the business of show.
To quote Gene Wilder.
Yeah. So so that
another guy who said, "All right, screw this, I'm going home."
Bye. Yeah.
Fans of cinema have to see Black Stallion and Never Cry Wolf. If you've never seen them, they are in your must-see list. Wind is an acquired taste. Wind keeps you is way more standoffish, but is really. And I think it's sad because I think you take for granted the miracle of what that film is and how what the things that they've captured in it. But it's a bit more standoffish and tougher to get into. The people in it are weirder, and they're just a little weirder than a mainstream movie from 1992 should be, probably.
Right.
The Fly Away Home, again, I don't know how anybody could not have a good time watching Fly Away. Fly Away Home is wonderful, but it isn't great cinema the way the earlier films are, even the way the best parts of Wind are. It definitely has that. Here we're showing you something you've never seen in a movie before, which I really, really like, but it once things get underway and we're heading towards the climax, that movie takes the easy way out just about every time. Maybe that's what you want. It's okay to do that every once in a while. It certainly feels good when you're done watching it. And Duma's, if you love animals, you love the African animals in particular, big cats. I mean, I should see it. It's fun. It's certainly not bad, but it's a slow burn of a jungle adventure. It doesn't spoon feed you really anything, and its triumph in the end goes a little bit unnoticed. So it kind of makes you understand why the end of Fly Away Home works so good, even though it's so staged and cheesy. We want that. There's nothing wrong with that. That's what we want. Yeah. Sometimes we really, really want it at the end of certain stories. So I get it. But Carroll Ballard, a special, unique guy who from film to film to film, you can see the voice of the artist at work in every frame and in every scene. And I really think that's unique. That's no knock on our more workman-like directors who just can fit into any story and do their thing. But he's a special kind of storyteller for a guy who didn't write much. I really admire him a lot, and I think these films are kind of neat. So that's the story.
Cool. All right. Well, to end this episode today, since we are, as we mentioned at the top of the show, we are coming up on the holiday season, and it is turkey time.
Turkey lurkey time.
Turkey lurkey time. I put together. Now I didn't put together a list of the best Thanksgiving movies.
That's good.
There's nothing like that going on. But what I did come up with is a Thanksgiving meal of movies. That's right. Okay.
Woo!
Here we go. Okay. So these are like the best instances of these elements of a Thanksgiving dinner. So the best turkey in movies. Now, the actual having a turkey, like what is the turkeys aren't really the subject of movies very often. However, the movie Freebirds came into mind because it is honest to God about 3 turkeys who travel back in time to try to make turkeys not the favorite meal.
Thanksgiving Day bird.
Yeah, the Thanksgiving Day bird, and I kind of dig that. I will give an honorable mention to the motion picture Thanksgiving, which is about a mutant turkey that kills college kids during a Thanksgiving break. So you kind of got to give it up for this sort of mutant, homicidal turkey axes off college kids during Thanksgiving. Yeah, not a family film.
Never heard of either of those.
Well, that's okay. All right, so next up is mashed potatoes, classic side dish for Thanksgiving. And really there is only one great mashed potato. Mashed potato, like there's a Christmas Story, eating like a piggy at the table. Mashed potatoes, however, the mashed potato scene in Close Encounters of the Third Kind really is maybe the greatest instance of mashed potatoes ever seen.
Fly in my potatoes. Listen closely when you go back and watch that scene. She's, hey, I want my potato. There's a fly in my potatoes. That little girl's just doing her own thing in the background. Apparently a fly got in there and she just was telling everybody. And they went on with the work. So that's pretty good. That's a pretty good scene. My boss really hates mashed potatoes, like vehemently hates them.
Oh,
I admit they're pretty much a waste of potatoes. I see eye to eye with him. But I cannot get enough of mashed. I loves me some mashed potatoes. He just sort of turned the potato, which is a wonderful thing, into just a pile of soft mush, and I don't know. I'm not into it. But I don't hate it. It's still potato. Mm-hmm. You put butter and salt on it and eat it. It's not going to kill you. But just interjecting since. This whole thing. I put this together. Ryan's just reacting. He's hearing all of this for the very first time. Another classic Thanksgiving meal side dish: corn. Now the corn appears in many movies. There's lots of corn where corn is very important. Field of Dreams, of course, we talked about. Wild Wild West, big chase scene in a cornfield where they're getting mowed, the corn's getting kind of carved down. North by Northwest. Not Wild West. That has a giant mechanical spider in it. Yes, and there's a scene where Will Smith and Kevin Kline have to, they're running for their lives, where these blades are flying through the cornfield at them. I'm sticking with North by Northwest, and if you want to go with a movie that rips that off, X-Files: Fight the Future does a pretty good job of it. Actually, yeah, that's a good. Witness has Death by Corn Silo. But I'm going with another movie that we've talked about on this show, not last week, but a couple weeks ago. War Games, because of this scene.
This corn is raw.
I know, isn't it wonderful? It's so crisp.
I love that scene. And to me, it is the finest corn moment in cinema. All right, next up. Cranberries, cranberry sauce and stuff does not, that is another divisive side dish for Thanksgiving meals. I am a big fan. My mother-in-law makes the finest cranberry sauce that I've ever had, to the point where if I don't get it during the holidays, I get very cranky. This one, cranberries being featured in films, not very often. I went with The Departed, when they talk about Leonardo DiCaprio's character ordering cranberry juice and that he must have a urinary tract infection because he's drinking cranberry juice. But I do want to give an honorable mention to the band The Cranberries for essentially being on every soundtrack to every rom-com in the 90s. The Cranberries appeared all the time. Cranberries were essential to My So-Called Life too, which was brilliant. Matter of fact, that's what I said. Somebody was like, well, they can't do My So-Called Life reunion because
This was some internet discussion I was part of, and they were like, because Claire Danes doesn't want to do it anymore. And I was like, well, I was like, you got the 3 boys, right? They could all be roommates together, or what's her face could be the maid. Everybody would listen to Cranberries. Who needs Claire Danes? And I won that discussion, and it's a good feeling to win stuff. My favorite Cranberries scene is when the Americans come to visit C.S. Lewis and his brother during Christmas, and all he wants is his cranberries from back home, like Joel. What he gets is a plate full of raspberry jam. That's all they have in Middle England during the holidays. I hate cranberries, so I hate cranberries. I hate any cran juice. Anything you put cran at the beginning of something good, like cran apple, cran this, cran that, you've ruined it with the cran part. What was wrong with just apple? Nothing. But that's just me. I don't even really like raspberries.
Yeah, it's the reason why Ryan does not like the movies of Bryan Cranston.
That's the only reason, because otherwise he does some mighty fine movies. Shouldn't have put cran at the beginning of that thing, man. Stun was doing just fine on its own, for real.
All right. Next up, green bean casserole, very popular here in the north. Green bean casserole.
We call it green bean hot dish, but other than that,
hot dish. And we talked about green beans earlier in the show with Never Cry Wolf.
Yes.
But I went with. Now, and this was a bit of a stretch, but it's really the only place, and maybe one of the only times that this movie will get mentioned on this show, is the can of mixed vegetables from Wet Hot American Summer that talks to Christopher Maloney and where they talk about Vietnam and everything, and that makes me laugh.
Definitely the best scene from Wet Hot American Summer. I'll give you that.
Macaroni and cheese. Mac and cheese, very popular side dish, Thanksgiving, especially in the South. And mac and cheese, mac and cheese appears a lot in films. There's Home Alone and stuff. But I went with again, I didn't really care for this movie, but Brad Pitt, when he makes his box of mac and cheese and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, that's pretty fun scene. But I want to give an honorable mention to the show Mac and Cheese, starring Joey Tribbiani from Friends. I loved that cheese became an acronym for some robot thing, and I didn't even bother looking it up, but it made me laugh.
It's a funny idea.
Yep. Stuffing. Stuff. There's the classic stuffing scene in the movie Bean, with Mr. Bean. But I went for the best use of stuffing in a film is a tie between the work that Steve Carell's character does in Dinner for Schmucks with the little mice, and of course Psycho, the stuffed mom. And so that is, I think those are my 2 picks for the best stuffing.
Nice.
And the final of the Thanksgiving meal of movies, for dessert. Now, pumpkin pie isn't featured very often in a film, but pie, obviously, you get a lot of pies, apple pies, things like that. Fruit pies of many different varieties often make appearances during Thanksgiving, and there are countless pie scenes, Blazing Saddles and all sorts of pie fights. But I went with the pie target practice scene in Dawn of the Dead, as a little homage to our friend Michael, where they're just throwing pies at zombies. And it's a moment of levity in an otherwise crazy zomborific world. And that is my turkey meal, my Thanksgiving meal of movies. All right.
If you really want 2 recommendations, my favorite Thanksgiving movies for their Thanksgivingness would be Michael Douglas and Brittany Murphy's Don't Say a Word, which is lots of Thanksgiving hostage-taking goodness, and The Lookout with Joseph Gordon-Levitt and Matthew Goode and Isla Fisher and the aforementioned Jeff Daniels. That is a fantastic Thanksgiving time movie about a bank heist, but there's really a lot going on in that. And my favorite ever Thanksgiving quote is from Trading Places, and it's spoken by a prisoner to another prisoner. It ain't cool being no jive turkey so close to Thanksgiving. That's good advice for us all, I think.
I think so. And I think that's a great place to wrap up the Movie Show with Joel and Ryan for this week. Of course, you can reach out to us at the Movie Show with Joel and Ryan page on Facebook, at the Movie Show with Joel and Ryan page on YouTube. Like and subscribe there, and like and subscribe us wherever you get your fine podcasts. You can reach out to us at Instagram, TikTok at Ask Joel and Ryan. Ask Joel and Ryan at gmail.com if you want to send us an email. We are off next week for the Thanksgiving holiday, and then we will come back and we will start a series of winter holiday goodness.
Starting with the eighth wonder of the world, Joel. If anybody got any King Kong ideas or plans, let us know.
Yep, indeed. King Kong time. All right, everybody. That is going to do it for us for this week. Thank you so much for joining us on the Movie Show with Joel and Ryan. Till next time.
Thank you for listening to The Movie Show with Joel and Ryan. Remember, all views and opinions represented in this podcast are personal and belong solely to the speaker and do not represent those people, institutions, or organizations that the speaker may or may not be associated with, unless explicitly stated. None of these views and opinions were intended to malign or deceive. And now, here's the producers, circa 1982, to play us out.